Today we're talking about fighting with women. The reason great relationships remain stable long term is because of how they handle conflict. You might be totally in love with a woman, but how do you actually deal with her emotions in those tough moments? This is a very touchy subject, and it's one of the trickiest areas to learn when you're in a deep committed relationship. I've helped and consulted with dozens of men across different relationships, and the stable ones all repeat this exact same formula. This framework has transformed countless relationships and it works every single time. So, in this video, I'm going to break down why most women like to argue, what most men are getting wrong, and how to actually stop arguing with them immediately. Oh, and I'm Keith. I have been writing online for the last decade. I have over 35,000 followers and I've helped hundreds of men navigate their relationships. All right, so the first thing you have to understand is that women argue to connect, but men argue to win. For example, imagine she complains how you never help her around the house or take her on dates. What you might be hearing, based on how you're conditioned to think, is that you failed her and have to defend yourself. So your first response is like, "What are you talking about? I took you for drinks last week and I cooked you steak the week before." Because you're annoyed at the comment and think the argument is about taking her on dates, right? You are presenting her evidence as if you're in a courtroom and your brain is in competition mode trying to prove her wrong. But she's not actually talking about helping her with the house or taking her on dates. This is just the surface language acting as a proxy. What she's really saying is that she doesn't feel your presence and has to test you to see if you actually get it. But you take the words at face value, as most men often do, and use logic to put two and two together, which actually encourages her behavior but invalidates her feelings. And this is what triggers a negative loop of endless conflict that can't be resolved. The thing is, you are wired to solve problems, not feelings. And when it comes to women, you don't have to find answers to their emotions. What you have to do is meet emotion with emotion and remain quiet. You must resist at all costs the urge to explain yourself because this is going to make the situation infinitely worse for you. Because hear me out, there are no arguments to be won, no justifications to be made, because these are all ways to solve, not stop conflict. In moments of emotion, common sense is just useless because when a woman wants you to get it, she means you're not reactive when she calls you out and be able to look at the situation clearly for what it is. It's just a signal that hints at something deeper about how you handle tension and conflict. It's important to understand the psychological differences between how men and women respond to conflict because it makes tricky situations easier for you to handle by uncovering the pattern and knowing how to actually respond. And better yet, your relationship is better off knowing you can keep drama at a minimum. Now, just understanding this alone will already drastically improve your relationship, but what I'm about to share next is what really determines how effective any of this will be, or whether you should just call it quits and walk, right? And it's this: the woman you choose to commit to is more than half the battle here, and often the most overlooked step in the whole dating process. Imagine you are an expert gardener, and you know exactly how much water your vegetables need, the right ratios for fertilization, and the optimal timing for sun exposure. But the only exception is that your soil is contaminated with heavy metals. No matter how consistent you are at watering, how skilled you are at everything else, nothing is going to grow because the soil itself is poisoned. So you can spend years perfecting your technique, reading gardening books and putting in a ton of effort. But your problem is not your skills. It's just that the soil can't grow. It's the same in relationships. If you don't choose a woman you can grow with, who is emotionally stable and aligns with your core values, no amount of doing the right things will fix that. So before anything else, take the time to actually know a woman's character before investing more time and money into her. This is the most crucial step because the stability and longevity of your relationship depends entirely on it. A good woman can be a net positive in your life when you know what you're doing, and she will make everything within it easier and more meaningful. But even if you did have the perfect woman and had a grasp of her emotional patterns, that's still a long way from actually never falling in the trap of argument and keeping attraction at a high, obviously. Which takes me to my next point. The cardinal rule of a low drama relationship is very simple. You keep your tone and attitude in check so that you consistently project more positive emotions and less negative ones. Now, I'm not saying you should never tease her or challenge her or any of that. Lightheartedness is very important. But a woman is like a mirror. When it comes to conflict, she reflects back what you feed it and make it even bigger than what it is in her head. So if you came back home from a long, stressful day at work, and in an effort to keep your annoyances behind you, you respond with a strong, frustrated tone, she's going to pick up on it immediately, even if your words are sweet and reassuring. Then you will be left wondering why her mood suddenly went from enthusiastic to distant. But since women emotionalize a lot, the delivery vehicle you use to transmit your words matters more in these situations than the words themselves. Because whatever emotion you project, no matter how much you try to hide it, is going to be magnified. So if you can strip your voice of annoyance, anger, or any kind of negative emotion, you can get away with clarifying or correcting behavior without triggering a strong negative reaction. And studies actually show that most relationship conflicts are triggered primarily by tonality. And if there are a set amount of variables to influence a woman's behavior, this would be the most important by far, and also the hardest to master in emotional moments because it requires, of course, a degree of self control. And speaking of self control, this next point requires a lot of it, but if done right, will immediately transform the way women see you and improve your connection tenfold without you actually having to do all the talking all the time. And it's what I call deep active listening, which is very different to what most people do when they are trying to listen or respond. Earlier, we spoke about women being mirrors who reflect your tone and mood. But now that role is going to switch and you are going to become a mirror. So think of it like this. Imagine she throws a ball at you, and this ball represents her emotions and her frustrations. What most men do in this situation is put up a wall and deflect those things back to her out of defensiveness, right? And to make it worse, you speak out of turn, constantly interrupt, and try to explain yourself, right? So she throws that ball harder, and the wall deflects it harder, and then she throws an even harder ball. And this is the escalation cycle, right? You think you're defending yourself, but to her, you're just failing to acknowledge the ball even exists. So instead, what we do is catch her emotions, right? We want to hold them up clearly for her to diffuse the situation. I see this ball, it's red, it's heavy, it seems important. Now she knows that you noticed and doesn't need to throw the ball harder, if at all. And you can both look at it together and decide what to do with it calmly without all the external noise. Because most arguments aren't about solving the problem that ball represents. That's a misconception. It's mostly about whether you can see and acknowledge it. So deep, effective listening is the art of seeing without defending. It's the fastest way to de escalate a sticky situation without losing yourself in the process. This is the difference between listening to respond, being reactive, as opposed to listening to understand, being proactive. This is giving you tremendous leverage in directing the flow of emotions, as opposed to being consumed by them, which is usually what happens, right? So the next time you find yourself in a situation like this, just ask yourself, how can I make sure she knows that I see her emotion without defending myself or having to explain? Because if you truly understand this, there will never be an incentive to argue at all, and you will be able to close off these traps before they happen. One of the most important tasks in any relationship should be to maintain a positive emotional state in women. And you can achieve that by controlling your delivery and listening to hers. And if you master these opposites, conflict will almost be non existent because you will have the tools to diffuse bombs before they explode, so to speak. So let's quickly recap what we covered today, right? First, women argue to connect while men argue to win. This fundamental difference is why most conflicts spiral just out of control, right? Secondly, partner selection is more than half the battle. You can't grow vegetables in poisoned soil, no matter how good your technique is. Thirdly, your tone and delivery matter more than your words because women are mirrors that amplify whatever energy you project. And finally, deep, active listening. Being able to catch that ball instead of deflecting it is how you de escalate situations before arguments even begin. Think about where you were at the start of this video. You probably came here frustrated, confused about why the same arguments keep happening, wondering why logic and facts don't actually work, and feeling like you're actually constantly walking on eggshells. But now you get it. She's just testing you. You're not failing as a man. You're simply responding on the wrong frequency. And most importantly, you now have a concrete framework to stop this negative cycle. So these aren't just abstract concepts anymore. They're tools you can use tonight. So here's what I want you to understand. You probably clicked on this video expecting some surface level communication tips or maybe another just be more alpha speech. But instead, what you got was the actual architecture of how conflict works in relationships. This is the pattern that stable relationships repeat over and over again. And now you have it. Anyways, my friends, that's all for today. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Of course, as always, if you want more personal guidance and a system to find and keep your dream woman, then click the first link in my bio to book a call with me directly. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you later. Take care.